Okay, so welcome, Revenue Strategies for Civic Leaders. Thrilled to have what might be, I think if this goes the way I think it's going to go, I can imagine this being the first of many sessions on this very topic. So I think many folks know me at this point. I'm Ian Ross. I lead Civic strategy here at Placer, which is everything related to making sure that our market insights and foot traffic data is able to support government and non-government economic development and tourism leaders in all of your pursuits. And this conversation today is just so interesting to me. So first, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. Wes Ria is the CEO of Visit Stockton, California, which is a destination marketing organization. I know we generally have a wide range of different types of civic leaders join us. So the DMO, conventional DMOs are focused almost exclusively on marketing of a region and then sort of seeing how, heads in beds respond, right? That's sort of the role of the DMO. Wes is a very hands-on leader in this space and looks much more broadly at the local economy and the KPIs influencing the local economy throughout the city of Stockton. So we've got a lot of interesting questions for Wes, and thrilled to be joined by Matthew Stifler from the city of Dublin, Ohio, Dublin, northwest suburb of Columbus. And Matthew is the chief, if I get this right, is the chief revenue officer, chief financial officer, and basically in charge of the numbers at the city. And they have made some very interesting moves to realign, you might say, with the situation that we're all dealing with in many ways, which are related to remote work and the fact that the commute population has shifted, both inbound and outbound, and how they are making decisions, policy decisions at the state level, at the local level, to realign and make sure that resources are available to service the populations where they are versus where they used to be. So with that, I'll sort of introduce a few topics. This is, as I mentioned, this will be the first in, I believe, what will be a series of webinars that Placers, that our Civic team will lead, focused on revenue. And if you think about revenue, just sort of writ large, right? I think this is captured probably 80% of where the majority, or I captured where the majority or 80% of revenue sort of tends to come from. Property tax, sales tax, income tax, travel and tourism tax. And then on the fee side, utilities and business tax licenses, franchise fees, which is going to be one of our future topics, use fees, grants, special assessments and services. I'm thinking we're going to do webinar conversations that cover each of these. But for this one today, we're going to start today talking about two aspects of local revenue. The first one that we're going to talk about is income tax, and we're going to lead with Matthew in that conversation. And we're going to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about travel and tourism tax. But like all of our conversations here at Placer, this is the discussion. And Wes has lots of ideas about revenue across the board. I'm sure Matthew does too. So I, of course, encourage our panelists, as I do every time, to simply think of this as a discussion among the three of us. And that also includes our audience members. So please post your questions into the QA or the Q, and we'll get to the A part of it as they come up. So as you have thoughts, go ahead and we'll make sure we leave time at the end. So before we jump in, very quick review for those of you who aren't familiar. Placer is a company that's built to provide insights into any place. And that place could be a city or a county or a region, all the way down to, one area of your local park where you host your farmers market event. So we provide insights based on the movement of devices that we observe, right? Mobile devices, fully anonymous, fully aggregated, so privacy first observations. And then we analyze that movement and we combine it with a wide range of other data sets that we use to tell the story. And we do this nationwide. So any location in the United States that you're interested in understanding better from a standpoint of who visits and who doesn't visit, we can help with that. And as I mentioned, we're a privacy first company. And this is a very relevant topic. It's always a relevant topic, but every state right now, and even the federal government, are really finally, in our opinion, talking about personal privacy and data privacy, and we are at the fore of that. We built our entire business model based on a fundamental truth that we believe and stand for, which is privacy first. So we don't collect any personally identifiable information. We are full compliance both with California and nationwide state laws, and we are actively at the fore of all of these conversations, working with, I think, just north of 1,050 civic clients, ranging from state and local government to not-for-government economic development organizations, travel and tourism organizations, CVBs, et cetera, to do everything from, retail analysis and recruitment, event analysis, revenue analysis, focusing on recovery and growth, sort of across the board. I also want to take an opportunity just let everybody know on this subject of privacy and on the subject of how our data can be used. We've put up a new page on the Placer website. It's Placer Data for Good. And you can, this deck will be made available, and you can find it if you go to Placer AI and then drop down the company drop-down list from the top rail there, and you'll see Data for Good. And there's some, a handful of stories up there at this time about how the data is being used for everything from mitigating food deserts to helping, support blood drives as needed, to, looking at how underserved populations are being looked out for from a standpoint of access to public open space. So you can see a number of stories there. Okay, so getting to today's topic, revenue strategies. I want to start with this. This is a fascinating and forever topic. This is not going away. Welcome to the world. What does it mean that we live in the world of remote work? And since the majority of the folks on here are going to have some interest at the civic sense, sort of through a civic lens, what does it mean? And if you think about it, it is, I'm gonna click the slide so you can think about how big I think it is. So I think of it as, the comet, the dinosaurs, like it's that big, right? If you think about how so many of our communities were originally laid out, let's say post-World War II investment, I'm going all the way there, right? A central business district identified and for business workers, right? It was this model of commute from home and then turn around and commute home to community of homes, right? And the land speculation and the land development followed in suit. So retailers were buying up the land on the homeward bound side of the road to put all of the grocery stores and all of the convenience stores where they thought people on the way home from work would then go and buy their items. So much of our communities are built around this idea that people went from point A to point B and returned to point A, and that the economy followed. So where we live today is in a world, I'm working from home today. And such a huge population are working from home today, at least some percent, right? Talk about the hybrid work week. The impacts on our central business districts is nothing short of transformational, right? Here's the quick dominoes. Fewer workers, more office vacancy. More office vacancy, an impact to property tax, like where we hear about the line at the reappraise my office asset going around the block. Right. So if the value of my office asset is built on to some degree forecast of revenue, I want reappraisal. I want to pay less property tax, less money in the city to do the things that the cities do with those property tax dollars. Right. Impact of fewer employee visits to local businesses. Everybody who's set up to serve the employees where we thought they were, and now some percentage of them, 30% in some cases, 40% in some cases, are not there anymore. Right? So impacts to local businesses, everything, transit, ridership, and events. And by the way, many civic leaders, economic development professionals sit with all of these as stakeholder groups, and it's competing forces, right? So if you lead a regional economic development organization and you incentivized to bring a certain headquarters to your region, and then the other side of your ledger, the bet you were making was, hey, all these employees, they're going to go downtown and feed in our restaurants, and our Chamber of Commerce is going to be happy, and our local business association is going to be thrilled. And now some percentage or a significant percentage of those workers are no longer returning to your downtown. Competing forces. You want the headquarters and the employees to be happy. You don't want to create some sort of, hey, you have to come back downtown, and that's not, or to the office. That's not working great for a lot of the corporations that have been instituting that, right? And then you've got your local business community saying, where are the mouths to feed? We have to do layoffs. So such a big story, and something that at Placer we're going to be following likely forever, right? And it's not just here at Placer. So our friends at the New York Times, cities face cutbacks as commercial real estate prices tumble. This is happening writ large. If you look at Placer's return to office tool, which is a free tool up in our square, you can see that the numbers still remain quite significant. Look at Chicago, 42% return to office from 2019, 42%, right? Think about that. 48% at Los Angeles. They're only at 50%, 50%. And you might say, oh, a hybrid work week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Hey, that's great. That also means that 40% of your local economy is no longer showing up at your, that's 40% fewer mouths to feed in your local restaurants, right? In fact, across the country, implications of remote work, employee visits still remain off at a significant clip when we look at a nationwide office building portfolio across Placer, right? So, Matthew, downtown Columbus. I pulled up the downtown the other day just to see how downtown is performing from a standpoint of non-resident employee visits to downtown. I thought I'd compare 2023, 12 months to 2019. It's still pretty significant, right? In 2023, you had 12.5 million visits, employee visits to the downtown. In 2019, look at that number, 20 million. That's massive. It's right, 40%, but it's just a massive clip, right? In fact, not only that, but in 2023, a lower frequency, right? So you have fewer number of employees going less often, right? And staying about the same amount of time. Now that's at Columbus. And here's how that looks, right? You can, just across the board, month over month over month over month, a significantly fewer employee visits to the downtown. Now, Matthew, you're not in the downtown, right? You're in Dublin, right? Which is conveniently up the road. And if I look at the zip code of 43017, just looking at that one zip code, and I don't know how much of your city sits inside that zip code exactly, but like you can actually say, hey, in 2019, you had 380,000, there were 380,000 times an employee left your zip code and went to downtown Columbus. But last year, it was only 230,000. Right? So 140,000 fewer departures from your community to Columbus. So to you, Matthew, from my understanding, you not only understand that that's the case, but you have literally realigned how the city collects income tax to make sure that if those people aren't going to downtown Columbus and they're staying here, then they suddenly, in certain parlance, become your responsibility, and you need to service them and take care of them. So take it away. Tell us about this story.
Sure. So thank you for the invitation. I appreciate being here today, and I appreciate seeing that data. I have not seen that before, and that's why I'm here today, because I'm interested in someone who has data and someone who has the expertise and knowledge to help drive some insights for me, because I think I have a fairly unique problem. According to the Government Finance Officers Association, less than 2% of local governments are funded by income tax. I would make a wager that almost all of them are municipalities in Ohio. We are funded, about 90% of my operating fund is income tax. It's a 2% income tax in the city of Dublin. Local income taxes in Ohio range from about 0.5% to 2.5%, depending on the municipality across the state. In Ohio, we pay income tax at your principal place of business. And that sounds very legal because that's what we've learned that it really means, your principal place of business. Where do you go to work? The city of Dublin pre-2020 had developed an economic model to build office buildings. We would generate about 70 to 80,000 visits every day in people coming into our town of about 50,000, collect all of their income taxes, and then provide services to the 50,000 residents as though we had 80,000 taxpayers. That was a great model when people went to the office. Not a great model when people don't come to the office anymore. And we very quickly have pivoted to a couple of actions. One, we have a council goal that's a few years old, but we've created a fiber to the home program. We've partnered with Alta Fiber to bring 10 gigabyte broadband to every residential address in Dublin. If you're going to work from home, 10 gigabytes is a pretty good speed to do it. So we want to capture that income tax revenue. We made that investment. We're looking at our office parks. We have an office park that's a standard office park built in the 1980s. We're redeveloping that. That's a second council goal to become a mixed use, high density development. People generally do not want to come to the office, but if they do come to the office, they want to go to someplace cool. They want it to have restaurants, they want it to have amenities, they want it to have interesting spaces to be, so that they feel like the trip to that place was worth it for more than just a sterile office environment. So we want to be the suburb that provides that, so that if you're working from home or you're coming into the office, we're able to capture that tax revenue. And there are probably a lot of other things I could say, but I'll leave it with those two major points as to how we're taking action. The other, I guess, important point is, if you're working remotely, a lot of people that, the 80,000 that used to commute in, a lot of them are going to live in Columbus. So when you work from home, you actually pay your payroll taxes where you worked that day. So if you're a 60-40 commuter, so you work from home 2 days a week, which is a pretty standard arrangement around here, 40% of your income tax goes to your home municipality and 60% goes to your principal place of business. So it's like 40% of our largest employers walked out of the city in one day when they instituted those work from home requirements.
And how are you capturing that data? Is that like, sorry to interrupt, but is it like honor system? Hey, tell us where you were.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the ORC is very clear about how you're supposed to remit your payroll taxes. But the reality is, you tell your payroll provider every 3 months, every 6 months, I'm going to work from home 2 days a week, work in the office 3 days a week. No one probably is that rigid to that system. You may not come in any day one week. Maybe you're on vacation. You may come in all 5 days one week because you have a big project.
Right.
They're likely not updating the payroll system to be that specific because nobody designed the payroll system to be that specific.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be neat if we had cell phone data to know where people actually to tax them accordingly. I won't go there. Wes, you were sort of shaking your head at one point when he was talking about this. I'm curious if that was a reaction to something Matthew was saying about how they've sort of realigned for income tax.
It's all like, again, thanks for having me here. I really wanted to learn something too, like Matthew, and I just learned a ton. That sounds like the most complicated revenue generating way to do things for a city. I mean, that is unbelievable. So yeah, that's crazy. I thought it was great that they built more buildings and they were bringing in more bodies to tax than they had residents. That's amazing, right? That's the same model as tourism, right? You always have retail leakage or revenue leakage, and you're trying to bring in visitors to bring in that backfill, that money that your own residents spend outside the city. But wow, when it's tied to income, that's quite the quandary.
Yeah, that's a very cool insight. And both of the residents who no longer commute, if you think about the dollars spent by employees when they travel, like I used to work in downtown San Francisco, I did it for 9 years, right? And I spent money every day, right? So now the question is, Matthew, how do you figure out how to capture that revenue closer to home, right? And by the way, some of the categories of whether it's retailers who do well during the day and are actually actively repositioning to capture these workers now closer to home, sort of goes back to my opener, which is there are certain retailers that used to specifically look for the homebound clover leaf, right? From the CBD to the destination, neighborhood, they would say, okay, certain percentage of the commuters are going to be getting off in this, and we want them to see our fitness, our grocery store. So now you've got this opportunity to capture. And it's interesting. I looked at a little bit at Dublin resident. I couldn't isolate in the time that I spent just for the people who formerly would travel to downtown Columbus, but just looking at Kroger. And by the way, I should just say everything I'm showing is part of Placer data, but I should point out that the sales component at the top, that's actually a new feature at Placer, which is sales data for certain sorts of retailers. And what I was looking at in Dublin, you know, the Kroger, which one is it? I'm gonna have to put my glasses on. How embarrassing for the location. Is it on Bridge Street? Bridge Street. Yeah, the Kroger on Bridge Street there. Right. So in 2023, it did $44 million of sales, right? And what's interesting is if you look in the lower right, I compared it to 2019. So you've got a significant uptick in sales and visits, I should say, specifically to that location. And you got to ask yourself, and I sort of show the day of the week, are we seeing more people who would have typically commuted to the downtown, right? Leakage, right? And now you got them. Now they're staying home. You're putting the gigabits into their homes to encourage them to stay close to home. And now you might even get paid back just on the grocery tax. I mean, that's a project for you to figure out, but this is the model, right? Which is like, where are my employees? Where are my daytime visitors? And then where's the money, right? I mean, that's kind of the bigger story that at the end of the day, I would imagine you're interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. We're interested in any type of data that helps us to pinpoint what does the work from home employee, what are they interested in? Do they want to cook every day and go to Kroger? Great. When they go out, what types of stores do they go to? What types of environments do they want to be in? We built some co-working spaces to allow, everybody wants that socialization component, but maybe you don't want to be tied to a specific location. So we have some co-working spaces. If that's where people are going, we certainly could use some more of those. If they're going to, Panera's or places where they can get soup, salad, kind of hang out with internet. Those are the type of retailers that we want to make sure that we put in these spaces so that we can create the environment to keep them generating income tax, frankly.
Gyms, right? Coffee shop, like all those places. And you think about, I mean, I used to go to a 24-hour fitness a million years ago in downtown San Francisco as part of my workday. I'm not going there anymore, right? So they're all the things that I used to do when I was traveling to the office, and I'm now finding it closer to home. Yeah. So let me swap gears for a quick second, but I do want to. It's all part of the same theme. Wes, the Travel Association, U.S. Travel Association, basically says we're back, right? If you look at domestic travel, they're saying leisure, business, auto, and air. They are saying in 2024 we're back to 2019. Thereabouts. 104, 95, 102, 104. Let's just say it's square, right? However, the U.S. Travel Association also says we might be back on actual travelers movement, but we're not back on revenue. We're not back on spend, right? So we're at 88, 89, 87, right? So we're not back on spend. So curiously, I found that interesting, which is everybody's traveling again, even more, but traveler spend is down. So I was looking into this a little bit. Wall Street Journal says cities are hurting because they're missing out, not just the business side, right, the employees, but travel revenue. And they're thinking about, shifting the burden to the homeowners, right? There's a bunch of, they're looking to raise residential taxes. They're looking at casinos. They're looking for events. We'll get to that, to get this revenue backfilled, right? But interesting, if you look at Stockton year over year, your stomping grounds, if I look at it year over year, you're just a snapshot of some of the hotels in your community. I was looking at the data on Placer. You seem to be right at the 2019 level and mostly a little bit above, right? So sounds like you're doing your job. Interestingly, though, when I look at the restaurants in Stockton, foot traffic visits to the restaurants that I believe are part of your restaurant week or whatever that week, I just grabbed those as a snapshot, but I looked at them across the year, almost across the board, fewer visits. When I consider all visitors, that's residents, visitors, employees, everybody, fewer. They're down. They are down across the board, 2023 relative to 2019. One caveat. If I go onto Placer and I isolate Just show me the visits by people whose home location is more than 50 miles away. You're up across the board, almost consistently across these restaurants. The visitors who live more than 50 miles away are visiting your restaurants more often in 2023 than they did in 2019, but everybody else, fewer visits. Can you help explain this this reveal?
Well, it's a fascinating numbers. We do a lot of culinary marketing, and as you kind of alluded to on the last one, we did have a group of restaurants that we had really focused on in January of 23 to market and promote. So we had done a traditional restaurant week where a select group of restaurants are promoted during a 10-day period, maybe 25 or 30 restaurants. But in 23, we really looked at how can we elevate the entire restaurant community? And so we did a campaign just for January. But what we learned from that is that we can, through our content marketing, increase visits to restaurants specifically. So when we look at our external marketing efforts, we do a lot of culinary marketing. And so, there's some organicness to this. I mean, obviously, people who travel 50 miles or more are going to eat out already because, they're not local or they're not going to drive right back to their home-based location. But we focus a lot on looking at those personas and looking at those likely areas that are going to drive visitation to restaurants, and we bombard them with a lot of our dining content. We know we have a lot of blog content that focuses on different ethnic cuisines or different farm to table type dining options, and we do a lot of culinary marketing. So to me, that's what it would be lean to. Dining is something that people do when they visit. It's probably the number one thing they do when they visit. Looking at what locals are doing and residents and employees are doing, and that decline in restaurants. I don't think we're unique there, obviously. It is interesting to see some of the restaurants and why they dip so far, but there are a lot of variables in that too, right? Everybody's labor costs are up. In California, the minimum wage, is $15.50 here now. And so costs have gone up, food costs, fuel costs in California are very expensive. So dining out locally has become more expensive. And so I think this reflects a lot of that change in behavior, is that people just aren't dining out as much as they are in their own local restaurants. But visitors, of course, since they're coming inbound and they can't go home to eat, they're eating out more. So we'd like to say it's some of our marketing efforts. We hope that that's some of the content that we drive. But also, there is just some economics involved there too.
It'd be interesting, and I didn't do this, and I wish I had. It'd be interesting to look at how the lunch crowd visits changed in that same time period compared to the dinner visits. Because my hunch, and maybe this might be something Matthew sees as well, is that if your employees aren't commuting in, I think that's probably far more situational for Dublin than Stockton in terms of outbound commute by percent. But if your employees are staying closer to home, have you driven lunchtime revenue more so than evening time revenue?
Yeah, I think for us, two things would factor into that. Number one, our central business district is heavily government. And so obviously they never stopped working. They worked 5 days a week and they don't do a lot of remote work. But interestingly enough, we do have a very strong commute. As you know, Ian, being in our region, a lot of our folks do go to Silicon Valley in the Bay Area. We probably have 20 to 25,000 cars a day that go out of town to do that. But I don't really know the impact, so there could be a positive, right? So those folks, a lot of them are working remote now because Silicon Valley already leans remote already. So it may kind of be a wash. We may see some of those folks that usually would commute, they're in town, so maybe they're going out. But I can tell you the restaurant community has been challenged. I mean, I don't think there's, we definitely are seeing closings in these central cores. Where typically the government center is here, but we've definitely seen a lot of restaurant turnover. Restaurants are a tough business anyway, but as you saw on your first slide, that obviously if locals aren't supporting them, they're going to continue not to keep their doors open.
Yeah, it sounds like that. Stockton is probably much more reflective of like many of the communities in California that have that very same trend line, where I think the visitor population is so vital to the local economies as a percentage now, especially, in terms of, because as US Travel says, points out, look, the visitors are back, right? Yeah. If that's accurate. By the way, and this is just, just to one more on that point, again, looking at, it's one of my favorite things to do with Placer data actually, is when you look at visitation to any chain, I use this term as like small C chain, like group of businesses or a portfolio of businesses in one area, or industry sector in one location, that you look separately at residents of the area who visit, employees of the area who visit, and then visitors, and then push out. There's a filter. I think that you push it out. You can say, hey, I want to look at people whose home location is more than 50 or more than 100 or more than whatever. And then what I like to use 50 as a sort of a standard for non-resident visitors. Year over year over year, Wes, the non-resident, I'm going to call it 50 miles, non-resident visitor driving your restaurant economy. I mean, that's what I'm seeing, right?
Yeah.
From 3,000 visits, 4,000 visits, 5,000 visits, almost 6, 15, 16, 16, everything on the rise. Restaurant by restaurant, everything on the rise year over year.
Our visitors spend on our latest data from 22, visitors spend $1 million a day in our city, and a lot of that is dining. And what and I love the fact that you're looking at the 50-mile radius. We look a lot at 30s. I love the fact that I can just look at the difference between a 50 and a 30, or a 30 and a 20, because for us, 30 cuts out, some of the East Bay area, 30 may cut out some of the Southern Sacramento area. So we look, or 50 Sacramento, and obviously a lot of the Bay Area. So we look at a lot of the 30-mile radius, and I imagine those numbers would be even more impressive. But yeah, it's amazing what visitors can do for your economy, especially when it comes to supporting those businesses that your own residents are not supporting.
I'm tempted to, I want to kind of stay on the subject for a second, but this idea of where does the money come from? San Francisco is sort of the poster child for, they were so heavily leveraged on office in the downtown. It's just office, office, office. And the hit was so hard, right? They're creeping back from employee visits, but harder maybe than most, because they didn't have the local residential population in the downtown. Some of the local organizations, I think this is the East Cut organization, turned to events and said, look, we can reignite, downtown, and we can grab 10,000 people to break the doom loop, right? But it's not just San Francisco. I told this story in a recent webinar. I'm going to bring it back up. It's fascinating. So Arlington Heights, right, outside of Chicago, and they had a music series, Concert in the Park series, that was scheduled for just Thursdays and Fridays, right? They were just doing it. They've been doing it for a decade. And then after the pandemic set in, they I like this comment where we were in an explore all options approach. Like, what are we going to do? And so they put up the barriers, they put up the lights, and they said, Arlington al fresco, convenient to have that alliteration. And they were like, we're going to do outdoor dining throughout the downtown. Fascinating thing happened. So not only did it sustain in 2020, but it perpetuates, right? The people loved it so much that they're coming downtown and they're staying outside and they're eating Fridays and Thursdays and Fridays. And if you look at employee visits to their downtown district, which had a large number of employee visits, right? They're not back, right? Not only employees are back, but the restaurant visits are higher than they even were then. So they've eclipsed, that was a timely reference, they've eclipsed the employee visits to restaurants by bringing locals into the downtown now in a way that they hadn't back when it was more thought of as the business district. In fact, not only the locals, but this is Placer data showing the home locations, right? The anonymous aggregated home locations of visitors to the alfresco evenings, the dining evening at that crossroads in downtown. And this is fascinating. What you can see is that they are actually drawing more young, lively, up and coming, this is all based on like Experian Mosaic data, from Chicago, who are now making the trip. I can see Matthew's like, how do I get those Columbus people to come to Dublin for dinner? That's this, right? So they are showing that, setting aside the employee population, they actually built something that is drawing young, urban, hip Chicagoites to make the trip to Arlington Heights for these events, the music and the outdoor dining. So much so that it became too much of a good thing. And the restaurants pushed back and said, we don't need this double, like the 1-2 punch anymore. We can't handle it. Can you kill the music, please, on Fridays? It's too much. There's too many people there. It's too busy, right? You don't hear that very often. Lucky Arlington Heights, it's literally too busy, too big crowds. So they shut it down, and they decided that they will do the concert series now Thursdays only. They had to shut it down because the 1-2 punch was literally too much. Not only were they drawing crowds, they were drawing crowds from afar. They were drawing crowds from Chicago. So events, is that the answer? Is that the answer, Wes and Matthew? Is that the answer to some version of how the tourism population of further afar is now blending with the economic development model, right? Are we no longer two things? Are we one thing?
Yeah, I'll speak to that really briefly. I think there was a time when I've been in this industry for about 18 years, and there was a time where events were one of those things that destination marketing just did not want to get involved in because there's a lot of mission creep. There's a lot of, it's a time suck. It's all the things that we don't need to focus in on bringing visitors to town because, of course, you may not be generating overnight stays from a lot of these. They may be just the drive market, right? But what we've really found is that destination marketing organizations are really looking at events as the new kind of product development. You're not going to build a new attraction or build a new museum, or it's creating an event that brings people to town that hopefully creates a return visit for another reason is really become our focus too. You know, we created our festival downtown with some ARPA dollar funding all around this whole concept of getting residents back into downtown Stockton. And so we created a whole festival to do that. Now it's only a 3-day event. But we haven't really seen a negative impact on our businesses. Most of them see a positive impact because we do see that people come back downtown on another visit after they've gone to the festival. So,
yeah. So the return visits is the sort of the KPI there. Matthew, in Dublin, are you seeing any? Are you putting any effort, any resources behind these sorts of events, and how has it proven out?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a new and interesting prong of a still developing economic development strategy. Of course, many of you will likely see the City of Dublin showcased nationally and worldwide with the Memorial Tournament in a couple of weeks, which is one of our premier events. And we're always happy when the announcer says from Dublin, Ohio, and not Columbus, Ohio. That was a huge victory when they started saying the suburb's name. So the Memorial Tournament is part of it, but we also have the second largest Irish festival in the world. We have 100,000 people come to our parks the first weekend in August. It's about 35 years old. So we have an event-based focus, but we have been doubling down on that. To kind of go with your Stockton example, the city closed several streets and a street grid network in our mixed-use, high-density kind of development district and placed tables in the street, right? Because everybody needed to be 6 foot apart, but people wanted to go. We didn't want these businesses to die. And the truth of the matter is it was wildly popular. And now people are asking us, why do we ever build roads there in the first place? Why didn't we build beautiful road wide walkways to have beautiful pedestrian spaces? And as we're investigating the redevelopment of Office Park, that's a great question because roads are expensive and pedestrian walkways and central gathering areas are preferred and a lot cheaper to build. And if they're a draw, then that's something we can build on. So we had a similar experience. And I would just say our Convention and Visitors Bureau is called Visit Dublin, Ohio. They did a presentation earlier this year about the opportunity to build a sports complex in Dublin. So youth sports. We want to drive people to come to Dublin for their soccer games, their basketball games, their baseball games, take them to our entertainment district in the evening and just create that activity so that we can continue to see income tax revenue indirectly, because it's not a great way to earn income tax, frankly, because we're employing restaurants, hotels, not office jobs. These are working jobs that pay a working wage, and it's a lot harder to make an ROI on that. but it is a model and it does have an opportunity to succeed. And it is what we're left with in this remote work world. You can't put all your eggs in the office basket anymore. It's not sustainable. You better diversify.
Yeah, it's funny. It's interesting you mentioned youth sports. We had a conversation a couple of months back on the impact of youth sports. We had a gentleman from North Carolina, works in Rocky Mount with their organization there. It is a massive revenue generator. In your part of the world, is it Roseville or one of them on the highway?
Placer County.
Yeah, Placer County. I mean, the youth sports events there, just the numbers, the dollars associated with these tournaments, volleyball tournaments, tennis tournaments, you name it, like it's astronomical. And you get the hotel dollars to boot, right? So there's so much happening in the youth sports world right now. It is just a massive, it's a massive revenue strategy. A couple of quick questions, because I know we've got a hard stop in about 6 or 7 minutes. Larry asked if some success stories, I guess, Wes, success stories on how government and tourism boards are mobilizing conference goers, business travelers, and concert goers through marketing and promotion. What are the marketing? You mentioned the culinary marketing.
It's not, anytime we have an arena downtown and we have a ballpark, so we do concerts downtown, and even when we do festivals or an event, it's always a challenge to get those folks, they're driving in from out of town, they're going to a venue they've never been to. A lot of times they're not comfortable just exploring unless they've done some research ahead. So for convention attendees, it's a little easier to really work on a program, either a show your badge program, or we have app check challenges that we can deploy in these. Sometimes we can do targeted advertising. If we know something's going to be really big event, we can geo-fence that event and hit it with advertising about nearby dining. We have blogs that are called, where to dine near the Stockton Arena, just so people will search that. They can get a curated list of that sort of thing. It gets harder though with arena, concert going attendees, because we don't have access to their email addresses or an event planner that can share our information with them, because that's typically what we'll do is we'll work with the event planner to help us get that information out on, here's the show to badge program, here's where you can get your discounts. With concert goers or festival goers, it is a lot more challenging. So it's educating your frontline staff at your hotels. We have all of our hotels have a local restaurant list that they hand out when someone asks for dining recommendations, because you don't necessarily want dining recommendations from a 25-year-old who works at a front desk at a hotel, because a lot of times they're not eating out the same places visitors may want, or where the true authentic destination experience is going to be. Buffalo Wild Wings is great, but I don't want them to go to Buffalo Wild Wings. I want them to support locally owned and operated businesses. So we do a lot of providing resources and tools to the arena and to our local lodging properties to really help them be better advocates to the guests, because it is tough when you have 15,000 people downtown, to try to drive them to shop and eat locally. It's not an easy thing. So.
Yes, it sounds like curating is a big part of that. And another question quickly from Stephanie Delgado: is there a way to track or see return visits? Oh, I think this might be to me. The conversation is reminding me of my parents. This is lovely. Who live in Pittsburgh and originally went to Detroit for the auto show. They return every 1 to 2 years based on their great experience. So there's validity to this idea of a strategy of people coming back. Yeah. So Stephanie, in the technical answer is, if you're using Placer data, yes, you can set your visitor observation filter for people who make multiple visits, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on. So you can do that. Now it's not people, right? It's not personally identifiable information. It will be the home locations in aggregate, right? So that is something that you can do. And I know that I was recently speaking with Catalina Island, and they have this little island off of Los Angeles. For those of you who don't know, it's a ferry ride. And the business model is pretty straightforward. Like the people get on the ferry, go over there, spend money, and go home. I mean, that's the business model. And they are trying to figure out this idea that the majority of the people who visit, like, they have a huge fall off, right? You've been there once, fall off, right? So there are some regulars, but they're trying to figure out how to market to folks who have been there once and give them a reason to come back a second time, And so I think that is probably an industry trend, trying to figure out that, like, or that one more night, that kind of an idea, there's that one more day to do. I don't know if Matthew or Wes have ideas about this idea of how do you think about visitors who are like sort of single visitors versus your return customers?
We know that there are marketing platforms where you can remarket people who visit a geolocation, and then you can serve them more advertising to extend that stay. But for us, we do look at, if we look at a footprint, either a POI or a district, we can look at that single visitor and kind of see what their demographics are and where they're coming from. But we can also look at that multi-day visitor and see what that difference is, and use that information to target those who are, again, maybe target those who are more likely to return. But we do on the advertising side and the people who sell marketing, there's a lot of folks who can work on the, arrivalist comes to mind, that work on arrivals to your destination, and they can track multiple arrivals. We kind of do it anecdotally. We look for lift, right? So we may have an event downtown. And so for 2 weeks after that, or maybe a month after that, do we see year over year more people going back downtown than the year prior? So it may not be perfect, but you're looking at that, post-event lift for a district. So if it's downtown, do you see people coming back more year over year after your festival than they did, again, year over year?
Matthew, I know you have a hard stop. I want to be sensitive to it. Matthew, as the chief revenue officer, are you chief revenue or chief financial officer? And I wouldn't even guess.
Chief financial.
Chief financial. So, officer responsible for the money coming in to Dublin. Any final thoughts about strategies that you're looking into that maybe aren't on the books, haven't been implemented right now? Like, what's on your desk right now about sort of like I mean, at some point you must have had a moment where you thought, it'd be really cool if we could actually capture income tax from people who aren't, and now you're doing it. Right. So what are you thinking about around the corner now about a revenue strategy for the city that you're able to share with us?
Sure. So the one of the strategies we're focusing on is changing the way we interact with our tax data. Tax data is highly confidential. It's probably the second most valuable data after health data that someone might want to get a hold of, because if you think about what's on your tax form, that's not something you want shared publicly. So we have not used or done a lot of analysis with tax data because, frankly, in a pre-remote working world, there wasn't much of a need to. All you had to do was lure the company owner to locate a building in your municipality, and your job was done. You were going to receive the income tax. So the details of where people lived, what their remote work capability of their job was, they didn't really matter as much because you had captured the principal place of business. So we didn't record a lot of information that, frankly, we have access to on a W-2, but time is money. And if you don't need to know where a person lives to collect their data because they're paying you through their employer, we didn't record it. So the first thing we're doing is cleaning that up. We're going back through and say, what do we have access to that we can utilize, and how can we utilize this? Because we have all the information we need. It's just in a very raw format. And you don't get the opportunity, frankly, as a data guy, you don't get the opportunity to look at a data set that's never been even run comparable statistics on it before. So this is a really exciting opportunity to me to see what's in there and then let that drive the next generation of economic development strategy.
Oh, that's a lot for me to think about. I think that's fascinating, actually, which is, what is the next generation of economic development strategy? And based, is it, and for my, personal interest, how does location data serve it? Right? Where are the people? Closing comments from Wes, thoughts? Just, I know we're sort of at time. Anything?
Yeah, I could talk to Matthew all day, because I just love to learn, like, there had to be some balance of those folks who went from Dublin to Columbus. I mean, I'd just be curious if he saw a huge revenue decrease from work from home, or was there, because here in California, people from small cities commute to big cities, but it sounds like he has a lot of commuters from the big city to the small city. So it's just fascinating. But for us, final thoughts, just one of the things that I'm working
revenue side, yeah.
From a revenue side, just real quick too, is just figuring out that hotel leakage, right? We have hotels that are not in our city. We're funded by hotel lodging tax, through a district, not through the city. And figuring out why people choose to stay outside of our city, because we know they visit our city. We can see that they come here. We're trying to figure out what causes them to visit outside of our city, and how we claw back some of that leakage and bring those people from the surrounding cities to stay within our own city. So that's my big conundrum, and I've been using a lot of Placer data to try to figure out all of that, and who's the worst perpetrators, and what POIs in our city drive the most people who stay outside of our city. So
I think I could probably guess who the worst perpetrators are, and I could probably even guess.
even our university, we have our university drives a lot of traffic, but they drive a lot of traffic to hotels outside of our city.
Yeah, and I even think I know where they go. Okay, I want to thank everybody, and I can think I can prove it in the data, but I could probably guess. I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank Wes and Matthew. I had a hunch that your two sort of insightfulnesses would make this very entertaining. And revenue isn't always an entertaining conversation. I hope we did our job and that people had an entertaining 45 minutes. But also got something out of it. And I got something out of it. I'm thinking about things in a new way myself, just from comments from both of you. Hopefully everybody else had that experience. So thanks to both of you very much. It is our pleasure to host you. And again, I love this topic. I think insights around this topic are hard to come by and not part of the, the common sort of, it's not what people are talking about, but it needs to shift. I love this idea of like the next gen economic development strategy. It's a convergence of residents, non-residents. I mean, we need to, and former commuters who are now at home, new categories. So let's keep that discussion going. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day to everybody, and we will make this webinar available. Have a great day.